Oh, yeah. That's what I was gonna guess. I've never seen
With the more formal part of today's event. Thank you everyone for coming. This is an excellent turnout. I'm Erin Anauen, the town supervisor, and I'm here with Charlotte Smithseth, who's on the town board. And we're just here sort of more as facilitators of today's forum. And we wanted to introduce the day for you. I'm actually really excited that we're doing this forum. And we have another sister forum on May 7th at 6 p.m. We're trying to have two different types of hour slots so that we could hit different. Some people can be here on the weekend, some people can only be here during the week. I'm really excited. This is the type of thing that I want to see us do more of in the town, where we are trying to have conversations and hear from the community before we make decisions. We want this type of interactive conversation and discussion to happen so that when the board is shaping our decisions, we have a bigger perspective before we're putting something out there and asking people to comment at a public hearing. So I'm personally very excited to have this format. But I think I wanted to let Charlotte introduce why we're doing this with housing.
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Charlotte Smithseth. I've been on the town board since 2022. I was sworn in. Welcome. I was the drafting and member of the resolution that formed the housing committee for town. And I've been their liaison ever since we formed them and appointed them. This is a portion of what needs to be done in the steps to, and we were gathering information from the community on a RETT, which is a housing transfer tax for sales of homes, and that would go to a specific housing fund. That's part of what brought us here. But we also really want to just gather the issues that people have faced in town for housing, what we want the community to be looking towards for housing, what everyone thinks that we need in the community to just keep everyone able to stay here and afford to stay here also. So I'm really excited to hear feedback from everyone and to get to know what brought you to Rochester or what kept you here if you were born here, those types of things. So yeah.
And so the format of today, we're going to start with the whole idea is that it's going to be interactive, but we're going to hear from Adam from the Patterns for Progress. We have a member, Jill, is here joining us from Southold, who their community went through the real estate transfer tax for our community housing fund process. So she's here to share about that. And then we have resident testimonials. The format that we are looking at is we want to look at like, what are the problems? So we have data on that, but we also want to hear from the community on what the housing issue is and how it impacts. And then the other portion of we want to talk about solutions. So Charlotte mentioned the real estate transfer tax and that community housing fund. That's one solution. There's other solutions. There are legislative solutions that don't involve taxing. There are other types of things the town board consider. So we want to sort of look at the bigger picture and hear from the community about what solutions seem like they work the best. So first, just to start it off with an icebreaker, we wanted to quickly go around like popcorn style and just see what brought you here today.
Okay, I'm Dan, and I'm here to learn. I want to hear what people have to say about it.
Ditto. Here to learn.
Here, Jessica Noble, and especially ADUs brought me here today. I'm kind of linear and trying to figure out how to age in place and what to do with my property as I age.
In that,
Nelda Garner, I'm just interested in seeing what we can do to get more affordable housing, especially rentals, long-term rentals.
Nick Erner, I'm here to learn about what the future of our housing symbol.
I'm from Bluestone Press.
Okay.
Happy to hear the.
Figure I was like,
What are those people?
I'm Neil here, just to learn about some of the issues that people are facing, and like Nelda, I'm interested in hearing about the potential for more long-term rentals.
My name is Jim. I'm here to hear locally about things that conservation of the environment as well as affordable housing at the same time.
I'm Bob Lesnow, and we're definitely interested to see if there's something that we could do to bring the rental situation into our property that would help us stay in place.
I'm Charles DeFreya. Obviously, I'm interested in what everybody else has just said. I had a business in town for a long time and had people working for me or with me, and obviously, finding homes for their family and places to live has been challenging. Like coming all the way, some of my people came all the way from Pennsylvania to work here. And, driving an hour, and there's no affordable housing here. So definitely trying to see, where we go with this.
Hi, I'm Cheryl. I'm curious to see how as a town we're gonna approach all of these issues. And, come up with some creative plan.
Larry Duet, I think we need more affordable housing, both ownership and rental.
I'm Bethany, and I think I'll add that I also just really like community conversations.
I'm Aura. I am also interested in seeing how a community forum could work. I'm interested in housing. I'm a builder and housing issues, learning about them, but yeah, equally interested in how these kinds of forums can unfold and be different from one another. Produce.
I'm Amanda. I would like to everyone, all of these topics are interesting. I'm an architect and definitely would like to understand more about the community.
Hey, I'm Jeff Gagnon. I operate a building company, Rondout National Builders. Where we look to source local materials and use biofiber insulations and earthen plasters, and just looking to the local landscape to provide as many resources for our buildings as possible, because we live in an abundant landscape and we should really be utilizing what's locally available and growing that economy. And definitely interested in alternative ideas and low impact site development. So
I'm Marty Roberts, and I'm a member of the committee.
I'm Tim Yates. I'd like to buy a house someday, or also have to move back upstate New York where I can actually afford something.
Cindy, and I'm just here to get more information and learn about.
George Fornino, and I will say I'm also here as officially, unofficially, as emergency management director for the town for now 20 years. And I think housing has become quite a bit of an emergency, so I guess that's the official part of why I came. And the unofficial part is I've also been a landlord, a long-term landlord, locally, and beyond that from my days where I grew up in New York City, for 45 years in my 71 on this earth. So, and so I want to hear what the community has to say. And I'd like to definitely put input into our need for long-term housing for people, because things are at an emergency level. And this is my wife and rents for me and my daughter to my left. So we're here as a family, which I include Tim in that, being a great tenant. So thank you guys for putting this together, Marty.
In the back?
Ken Stevens, I'm a member of the Housing Advisory Committee. Really happy to hear all the comments thus far.
I'm Julie Goldscheid. I'm someone who lives in the community and cares about housing and sees the emergency, and I'm gonna have to leave in a few minutes, but I was here, so I wanted to hear what you all had to say, and I'm really glad that you're doing this and soliciting input, because we so need to kind of shift the needle and create more affordable housing.
I'm Lenny Fornino. I was born and raised here. I would like to stay here. So that is why I am physically here right now. Because no one my age can honestly afford to even rent here, because there's nothing to rent. So that's why I'm here on people my age on their behalf.
I'm Lloyd, I'm here to learn.
Madam Bosch, you're gonna hear a lot from me, so I'll be quick. I run the region's Housing Education Research Center. We also designed the housing policies for 5 or 6 out of the 9 counties in the Hudson Valley. So you'll hear from me in a minute.
I'm Neil Knapp. I was dragged here by my daughter Charlotte to give a testimonial on the housing in this area and how difficult it is to find affordable renting, especially for seniors. So that's why I'm here.
I'm Charlotte. I think we all know I'm here because I'm with the housing committee and I'm a liaison, but I've also been a resident like Lenny for my entire life here and had a lot of challenges finding housing. I luckily married a man who bought a house, so that got solved after that. But if that hadn't happened, I probably would still be in the home share where I paid $400 a month to stay in my cousin and her husband's extra guest room. So instead of with my father here.
Jill, do you want to give a brief hello?
Sure. I feel like I'm in my hometown when I'm with you because we have the same issues here on the eastern end of Long Island. I've lived out here all my life and I'm currently single and living in a small apartment. And luckily, my rent is not that bad. But for the most part, rent here is exorbitant and a single person can't afford to rent their own place. Yeah, I've been involved. I've been on the town board for 14 years. I've been the liaison to the housing commission that we've had for about 5 or 6 years now. And back in the 80s and 90s, when I was an administrative assistant, I was involved in the affordable housing projects that we had around town. We haven't really had any in about 15 years, but I'm excited to say we've got a few projects in the queue, one for rentals, one for ownership. So it's exciting. And because of the 0.5% tax on transfer tax, we're able to do a lot of these projects. And I can go into what we're doing so far with that later.
And then I think, being the town supervisor, I hear a lot about housing. On a personal note, though, I'm a business owner, and that's been something that I've been really aware of, that has been a challenge in terms of hiring and retaining employees. That most of our staff don't live in the town of Rochester. They live in Ellenville or Kingston or towns that are they can get something a little bit more affordable, and then they have this commute. So they're working long days, long hours on the farm, but they're also having to commute because there's nothing comparable. And it can be, we have had people that have moved up north, longtime employees that we really loved, but couldn't stay because they just needed to move out north where things cost a little less. So from that perspective, I have, I see the need from an economic development point to make sure that we have our workers that are here can stay here. So with that, we are going to move along and we'll do
Do you want to start with Jill so she doesn't have to sit online through my spiel?
We could do that.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that? Switch.
Sure, whatever you want to do. I'm in no hurry.
That way she wouldn't have to sit on
So,
Zoom.
Jill, did you have slides or anything that you wanted to share?
Well.
Sorry.
We wanted to set the need first and then the solutions. I mean.
Okay.
Oh, you're right.
However you want to do it, I'm fine.
Okay.
Thanks, Alana. Yeah. Yes, so we are trying to set the need first, then talk about solutions. So we'll,
Yep.
I'll just do a little quick tech, switch. So we're gonna get for the people watching at home so they can see.
There. Let's just move Jill over.
Just do it this. Okay, and then you have a clicker.
Yeah, I gotta click. Let's just click on my slides, because I'll just like click the slide and then, all right, okay. Okay. Well, hey, everybody, I'm happy to be here. My name is Adam Bosch. I'm the president and CEO of Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress. We are a nonprofit regional research and planning organization that was founded in 1965 by the region's academic, business, nonprofit, and government leaders. And we really are meant to be the organization that comes to groups like this and helps you have a common foundation of knowledge from which to make decisions about what you want to do in your town. And I'm going to go through with you a lot of information today on housing trends in the region. And then I'm going to go through with you some housing trends and housing stressors in your particular town. I want to start by saying my wife was born and raised here in the town of Rochester, and I lived here for 2 months when we got out of our apartment before we built our house. We lived in her parents' basement, which was a wild 2 months, right? And this picture is actually at Kelder's farm, because remember those old baskets on a stick when you go apple picking, right? Well, I found myself like I was getting tired of holding the kid and the basket on the stick. So I said, why don't I just throw the kid up in the tree and we'll pick apples like that? And it made my life a lot easier. So I figured I'd include a town of Rochester photo in my slides to start. Okay. I already went over who we are, but we are our job at Pattern is to do objective, nonpartisan, accurate research on a whole bunch of topics: housing, transportation, community development, infrastructure, demographic changes, something that I'm going to go into quite a bit here. We've been doing this for 60 years and really happy to lead the team at Pattern. One of the initiatives we have at Pattern is we run something called the Center for Housing Solutions, which is the region's housing resource center. So we do all of the housing research for the 9 counties north of New York City, Rockland and Westchester, up to Greene and Columbia and out to Sullivan, including here in Ulster. We also design a lot of housing policy for towns, villages, cities, and counties. The state, actually calls me up almost weekly at this point, asking us for advice on housing strategies. I'm also on the governor's executive committee, regional council, that determines how economic development dollars get split up across the region. So we have our hands very deep in sort of understanding the housing challenges, but also coming up with solutions. I'm not going to go through all this, but I just want to underscore, we did write the housing action plan for Ulster County. The Ulster County Housing Smart Communities Initiative was our idea, and we designed it. And we've done a whole lot of research recently that I hope some of you have read, including Out of Reach, which is our annual report on housing affordability. Next edition comes out in July. And When Hotels Become Home, I'm sure you've heard about here in Ulster County that we have proportionally the worst homeless crisis of any of the 9 counties in the region. Okay, we have lots and lots and lots of families living in hotels right now. We have proportionally the most homeless public school students of any of the 9 counties right now. And it is just indicative, it is a harbinger of the depth of the housing crisis in our county. And I will walk through why that has happened and what we might do about it. Someone mentioned the intersection between housing and environmental protection and conservation. I think it was you, sir. We are also the fiscal sponsor and in fact are sort of partnering on the operations of something called the Hudson Valley Alliance for Housing and Conservation. Very relevant to a town like yours. For too often, when we do comprehensive plans, when we do zoning, when we think about how we're going to operate our local governments, we put together a committee for housing and a committee for open space that don't talk to each other. They're separate chapters in the comp plan. And then when a project comes to the planning board, both those committees come out and fight in the middle of town hall. And it's bullcrap. It shouldn't work that way. It doesn't have to work that way. Healthy communities have an ample supply of conserved land for recreation, water protection, growing food, and they have an ample supply of housing that's affordable for people of every income level across all the different kinds of typologies you've been talking about as part of this committee. So this group is an alliance between 8 affordable housing developers in the region and 8 land conservancies who are getting together monthly and talking about how to be partners instead of enemies to push this into more communities that you could, should, and ought to plan for both. Okay? All right, let's dig in. I'm going to go through a lot of data very rapidly, so stick with me here. Let's start at the beginning. Housing is expensive right now, right? And it has gotten very expensive very quickly. This is the median price of a home, okay, in all 9 counties that we cover for the past 6 or 7 years. And a couple things should stand out. Look at how rapidly home prices have risen during that time. Here in Ulster County, the price of a median price of a home is up 77.4% just in the past 5 or 6 years. You'll notice Sullivan is more than doubled. Of course, it started a lot lower than here in Ulster. But if I had to pick out 2 counties that statistically have the worst housing stress right now, it would be Columbia County's #1 by far, and we're #2. Okay? Columbia County is by far #1, but we are a very kind of close second. Okay? Right now, median price of a home in the county hanging out around $450,000. Note something interesting, because I grew up right on the Orange-Ulster border. Never in my life did I think I'd see a day where the median price of a home in Ulster was more than in Orange County. Okay? That'll tell you something, right? Okay. Now, what does this actually mean? What does this actually mean? When we say home ownership is out of reach, what does that actually mean? It's not just a bumper sticker phrase. It's not just something to put in a pamphlet or use as a war cry. It's a statistical fact, okay? So I want to show you this. These bars, okay, let's look at Ulster County. This first, second, and third bar is the maximum amount of mortgage that a 1-person household, 2-person household, and 4-person household would qualify for. The maximum amount of mortgage they would qualify for if they went to the local bank today with a perfect credit score. Okay? That's the maximum amount of mortgage that a 1, 2, and 4-person household will qualify for. That last bar is the amount of mortgage you would need to buy the median price home in the county. Okay? So what we look at when we think about this, we tend to look at the difference between the second bar and the fourth bar. Why? Because that second bar is you, right? Someone who would aspire to be a first-time homeowner. And that fourth bar is where they need to get to do it. Okay? That gap in every county is between $99,000 and $280,000. Those are 2024 data. When we put out the new report in July, the preliminary sense of things is that all these gaps are going to jump by about $10,000 to $15,000 based on the median home price data that we've seen. So if you don't own a home now, your chances of owning one don't exist, statistically speaking. Okay? Yes.
Can you repeat what that gap is again?
So depending on the county you're in, it's between $99,000 and $280,000. You could look at that 2 different ways. That's the amount of additional lending ability that you would need to gain by having your wages go up, or it's the additional amount of down payment you'd need to find above and beyond the traditional down payment, which I forget what it is now, 7%, 8%, something like that, 6%. I forget what the traditional down payment is. Yeah. So you can look at that a couple different ways. Here in Ulster, I'm just doing the math quick because I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me. We're at like 240 is what they would qualify for. They need to get to 380-ish. So it's about $125-ish thousand gap in Ulster. Okay. So that's where we're at. Now, I want you to think of housing like a pipeline or like a continuum. There is a clog in the pipeline right now at the home ownership level, right? There are lots and lots of people who 10 years ago, 20 years ago, would have been able to graduate up into home ownership who now cannot. So what that means is we have a larger body of the middle class in the region seeking out rentals when before they would not have been, okay? So that's putting additional stress on the rental market because demand for rentals are going up. And I'll say in the region, we're starting to catch up a little bit on the supply side because there are about 13,000 units of rental housing in the 9-county region, including about 2,000-ish here that are either under construction or have the approvals to go pull a building permit, okay? There's about 5,000 in Dutchess, about 2,000-ish in Ulster right now, okay? However, what we've seen is that pressure, that increased demand for rentals, combined with higher taxes, higher energy costs, repair costs, is driving up the cost of rent far, far faster than renter wages are going up. For most of the past 15 years, we have seen the same thing year over year over year, that rent is increasing at about 2-to-1 ratio of renter wages. So if rent went up by 7%, renter wages in the same year went up 2 or 3%. If rent went up 10%, renter wages went up 3, 4, 5%, okay? That rent is sprinting away from renters faster than they can catch up to, okay? Now, that gap has gotten bigger faster in the past couple of years. We are now seeing where rent is going up 10, 11, 12% per year and renter wages are either bottoming out, staying flat, 1%, or even backsliding. Why are they backsliding? Because most senior citizens, when they retire, see their incomes modestly drop back. So you're actually seeing those senior citizens who are becoming renters have their wages, and this happened to my parents, right? Go back a little bit. And that's why you're seeing this. There's a little bit of a retirement wave among the baby boomer generation in the data here. And so that's going to show up as a new metric of need in our communities as that baby boomer retirement wave continues to build and build and build and then crash ashore, right? Okay, very important to see this. So bigger stress on renters. Now, I'm sure you all have had a good debate about incentive zoning, about affordable set-aside policies, about whether you should, when some developer comes along someday and says, we'd like to build something here in Rochester, should we require them to build a certain number, a certain proportion of units that are affordable for people making a certain level of income? I'm here to tell you now, these formulas are broken. And I will tell you why. We have seen AMI, area median income, go up and up and up and up rapidly. I'm going to show you this in a minute. But as area median incomes have gone up, renter wages have really stalled out. So if you think of the area median income as the denominator in your fraction, the renter wages are not going up. The numerator is not going up as fast as the denominator. So check this out. The average rent right now in Ulster County is making 38% of AMI, okay? 38%. Most towns 10 years ago, when they made incentive zoning, said, we want the developers to come along and provide a certain number of units at 80% of AMI. Doesn't work anymore, because that's not where the demand is. That's not where the deepest demand is, right? It's still better than nothing, right? It's still better than nothing. But as the AMI goes up, what we're seeing is a lot of people who were in the 80% of AMI bracket, like in 2005, have now dropped into the 50% of AMI bracket. Very, very complicated math. I'm going to walk you through it in a little bit more detail in a minute, okay? Now, this is the other thing that's important to understand, the way that wages have shifted over the past 10 years. This is just 10 years worth of change adjusted for inflation. Over the past 10 years, if essentially you're in the lowest quintile of earners here in Ulster County, that means the lowest 20% of earners, okay? You've seen your purchasing power drop by 16%. If you're in the second quintile, right? which is making about $47,000, you've seen your income improve based on inflation by 2%, right? 40 to 60%, your income is improved by inflation over 7%. Fourth quintile, 10%, highest quintile, 15%. What that means, and I'm gonna bring this chart back in a couple slides, is that because housing during that same time has gone up by 70 to 100%, housing is eating into more and more and more and more of our neighbors' incomes, okay? Essentially, these numbers would need to match the rate of inflation on housing for people to have not been affected by the growing cost of housing. So more people are putting a greater proportion of their income toward housing. What does that mean? It means at the end of the day, they're a little bit more strained to buy groceries, pay for energy, have a car, okay? And what really makes the regional economy go round is them doing things that are the optional things, going out to dinner, buying furniture, right? Whether we like it or not, we're in a consumer economy. So when this happens, right, people don't have money left over at the end of the month to go out and buy the goods and services that make the economy hum. And that can be a drag on local economies, okay? Real quick, how do I get there? Okay. I want to talk about a couple of the factors that have affected the demand for housing and the cost of housing in the region. If you go way back and you start to think about where the seeds of this housing crisis were planted, it was during the Great Recession of 2008. And there are two things that happened during the Great Recession of 2008 that planted the seeds of our current housing crisis. One is that during that Great Recession, hundreds of local contractors went out of business. And those local contractors included the small developers who were building housing all across New York, okay? So we lost a lot of companies that were building housing in a rural context like yours, okay? That's one thing that happened. Second thing that happened, does anyone remember the Merriam-Webster Word of the Year from 2009? This is the quiz part of the show. It was staycation. Remember the word staycation? Staycation. During the Great Recession, people didn't have enough money to get on airplanes and fly to exotic vacation destinations anymore. So guess what they did? They got in the car and drove north until they found somewhere pretty. And we were it. We were it. Right? And there was a rediscovery of the Catskills, and there was a rediscovery of the Gunks, and tourism started going on this increase, right? People started buying second homes. They started renting out short-term rentals. Airbnb listings took off, right? And then what happened? We had the pandemic, and it gave that trend that started in 2008 with staycations, it gave it miracle grow. And then it started growing and blossoming and ended up with this thing we have now. And one of the things you can see here is the migration patterns into Ulster County, right, during the pandemic, right? We had been losing people to migration. That's the movement of people from county to county and state to state across the country. The region over the past 20 years has lost 140,000 people to migration, more people moving out than moving in. And Ulster had been losing people every year as well. Until the pandemic, when we gained, right, 2,000 people, okay? Now, that's on a net basis. We gained 2,000 more than we lost. But a whole lot of people left and a whole lot of people came. The thing I want you to understand is it didn't really change the number of us, but it changed the constitution of us. Now I'm going to show you that next. What do I mean by it changed the constitution of us? This is an impossible slide to understand, so I'm going to explain it to you. When you think about people moving into the county and out of the county, they bring their incomes with them, or they take their incomes with them, okay? In a typical year before the pandemic, when you balanced out the incomes of the people moving into Ulster County and the incomes of people moving out of Ulster County, on a net basis, there was about $8 to $25 million in income more moving into Ulster County than out. Okay? We were slowly getting richer, if you want to think of it that way. Okay? However, during the pandemic, that really changed. In a single year during the pandemic, more than $250 million more income moved into our county than out of it. Okay? I don't mean this as a bad word, but in Ulster, in Sullivan, and especially in Columbia County, we have seen gentrification at the speed of light. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that's bad. A little gentrification is good. Having people come in who have expendable income to support local businesses is good. Who might come in and start businesses on their own is good, okay? But this really pushed up housing costs because about 25% of all home purchases were all cash and over the asking price. Okay? And that drove those housing costs way, way up very, very, very rapidly. Now, we're a little strange, right? Because the state has been steadily and rapidly losing incomes as a whole. So New York State is losing people and losing incomes somewhat rapidly. But here in Ulster County and in much of the Hudson Valley, we've been gaining. Now, look. This is what I want you to think about. This is very, very important as you consider the typologies of housing you need and who your target audience for that housing is. Look what happened. This is Columbia, but look down here at Ulster. You will look at Columbia as well. This is the average household income of people who moved into the county, okay? Average household income of people who moved into the county that year, $126,000-ish. Average household income of those who moved out, $76,000. Up in Columbia, literally, we looked at 40 years of these data. We've never seen anything like this in the history of the region. Columbia County, average income of households moving in, $166,000. Average income of people moving out, $68,000. So what does that mean? That means you have largely upper middle class people moving in, likely with jobs elsewhere that they're telecommuting to or working remote. And they're replacing kind of this core middle class, blue collar service worker type household, right? Like my folks who, my dad worked at ShopRite for 4 years, my mom was a medical records clerk, right? But we were this family, we were the move out family, okay? So when we think about this, we start to worry about workforce shortages, okay? We also start to worry about full-time folks, enough full-time folks having access to housing to maintain a customer base for our local businesses. Okay, latest data from 2021, 2022, the 22-23 data come out later this next month. Inflow 109, outflow 98. So we're still tilted in the more money coming in than going out. What you see here really now is that if you don't have a decently high income, you just can't move at all. That's what's going on, okay? I'm gonna try to get through the rest of these real quick, but I want to just hammer home some important points. I am not gonna go through this whole slide, but I do want to just underscore some very, very important things. One of the problems we have in the region is we have lost the first rung on the ladder of home ownership, right? I mentioned that, it's gone. And one of the things that we're asking every community to think about is how can they reestablish it? And it's that home in that 150 to 350 range, maybe more like 150 to 250 range, depending on where you are. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that house doesn't look the same to everybody. We don't just have in the spectrum of housing homes and apartments. No, and I know you guys know this because I was looking at your board term, right? You have single family homes, duplex, triplex, quadruplex, right? You have mobile homes, townhomes, condos, co-ops, apartments of various sizes, right? And right now in much of the region, the answer to that missing rung is more like a condo townhome type thing. Maybe a small home on a small lot, depending on where it's built and the construction methodologies that are used. But this is really, really important. I want to hit two other points in here. As you talk to your neighbors about the value of housing, it's really, really important to connect that to the people who need the housing. As I mentioned, my mom and dad, my dad worked at ShopRite his whole career, my mom's a medical records clerk. I think everyone in this room would agree that when you go down to the grocery store, you want to see that the shelves are fully stocked. And when you call up your doctor's office to get your medical records transferred, you'd like that done today, thank you very much, right? But those services and goods are not there unless the people who provide them are there. And the people who provide them are there, they don't exist unless they have housing, right? So if we want the goods and services that we've become accustomed to within a reasonable distance of where we live, then we need to support the housing that allows the people who provide those goods and services to us to be our neighbors. Otherwise, we're flying blind in this whole thing, right? So very, very important that we're able to communicate that to people who are reticent about housing, hesitant about housing, oppose housing. Cool. oppose housing, but the data show that some of these goods and services are gonna dry up. We've lost 50% of the childcare in Ulster County over the past few years. Why? Because these people are paid poverty wages, and they have nowhere to live. So we gotta really, really think about this sort of stuff. Last thing here, real quick. I want to underscore that the major driver for housing demand right now is not, I repeat, not population growth. We are not growing, okay? We are not growing. The major driver of housing demand in this region right now is really two things. I'll start with the least important first. I call this the junk drawer of reasons, okay? We are losing some of our housing stock to a whole bunch of different things. We're losing some to dilapidation, okay? That's more important. Like in Sullivan County, you're losing a ton of housing stock to dilapidation, okay? Maybe not as big of a force here at all. We're losing some to second homes and short-term rentals. Up in Tannersville, 30% of their housing stock is in short-term rentals, okay? And we're losing some, I'm gonna show you this in a minute, we're losing some to remote work. What do I mean by that? If someone who is working remotely is living in the housing stock here in Rochester, wonderful, they might spend their money here in town, but that home is then not available to someone who goes to school here, works here. It is sort of off the board for local people, okay? That's one. But the biggest one, and this one is hard to understand, I'm gonna go through it with you. The biggest driver of housing demand in the region right now is the shrinking size of the average household. Okay, there is an inverse relationship between the size of the household and the demand for housing. As the size of the average household shrinks, the demand for housing rises. Follow me here. Let's say the population of the town of Rochester 10 years ago was 100 people. And all those 100 people were in families of 5. How many housing units would you need? 20. Now, 10 years go by, you still have 100 people as your population, but now all those families have shrunk to families of 4. How many housing units do you need now? And you didn't grow by a single person. That is the biggest driver of housing demand in the entire Hudson Valley. And because our population has been flat at 2.4 million people for 30 years, and the average size of the family is shrinking rapidly. I'll be a good example. My dad was 1 of 4. I'm 1 of 2. My son is 1 and done because my wife says we ain't doing it again. Right? And that's what's happening all across the region. Check out your statistics here in the town of Rochester. Okay? You haven't grown at all, right? You've been at 7,300 people for the past 10 to 15 years. But look what's happened to the average size of your household. You've gone from 2.55 to 2.9. What does that mean? Just because the size of the average household is shrunk, your housing demand's going up by 300 units, right? So just have your eyes on that. For folks who come out and say, we can't afford to have more kids in the schools, which is something we'll dispel in a minute, I'm sure you've dispelled already. Or, you know, who's this housing really for, right? All these people come out with these concerns. If you don't build this housing, you are essentially assuring your shrinkage. Okay, very, very important to understand the math behind the housing need. I'm not going to go through this, but we can talk about this during the solutions section, okay? Lots going on. We have counties passing housing programs. You obviously have the one here in Ulster. I'm sure your town has looked into some of the local adoption tax credits. There's 49 of them that the state allows you to adopt, including 21P and PP, which was just put in the budget last year. Important for you to understand that. I know our friends from Long Island are going to talk about community housing funds. I was just with Commissioner Wisnowskis from HCR on Friday. They're going to be rolling out a whole bunch of new housing support programs this spring and summer from the state. ESD is now in the mix funding housing. Discussions with IDAs. IDAs are having discussions because the reason we're failing to attract a lot of businesses to the region is we have a workforce density problem. So the IDAs are understanding that their success in attracting business is going to be the housing is a precursor to it, right? Housing is a precursor to it. Common goals here, bridge the capital gap. Okay, real quick, what's going on in Rochester? Population is flat. You are deeply experiencing the regional and statewide youth crunch here in town. And you're not the only ones, it's all across the region, right? So school enrollment down 27%, right? You guys know that. Households with kids are up, but I just have fewer kids in them, okay? So school population down 619%. Signs of a shrinking workforce, which I'll show you in a minute. You have nearly triple the number of people in town working from home compared to just 7 years ago. So your work from home population has grown from 303 people in 2010. You have 878 people. 22% of the working population that lives in the town of Rochester works from home. Okay? And I'm telling you, they're not working in local jobs, right? Those are jobs based in New York City or in New Jersey, and they're living here and working here, right? Look at Ulster County, right? Number of people working from home has gone from 5,300 to almost 13,000 in just 7 years, okay? You have the second highest proportion of work from home in the north of Westchester County. Median home prices increased. In 2017, your median home price here in town was 185. I'm sure you saw the assessor's data last year was 577. Right? That's a big jump. Last couple things here. It's covered up really, thanks. You have about 3,100, 3,200 housing units. 84% of households in town own their home. That includes 87% of the population. You have about 508 households in rental situations, or 16% of your population. Interesting here, I've looked at these data for a while because we see these in other sort of like Catskill, kind of like rural towns. It says you have about 1,000 vacant or seasonal homes. My guess is that's a combination of second homes, short-term rentals, right? It's really tough, but this data does not have a big margin for error. So at the very least, you have several hundred, either second homes or seasonal homes. This may include some that are vacant and dilapidated, okay? Median rent, this is absolute nonsense. It cannot be $1,153. I would bet my entire life savings that's not true. That's what the data say. I spent an hour last night searching through every rental database that exists, and all the rentals listed for the town of Rochester are between $1,500 and yes, there was one for $9,500 a month. Okay, I'll share this in a minute. Cost burden among renters has risen. So this is cost burden. I'm sure you guys have spent some time talking about cost burden. What does affordable housing actually mean? Affordable housing simply means that we don't want to see anyone paying more than 30% of their income toward their housing costs, right? So affordable housing for me is different than for my parents. It's different than for my brother. Your renters have seen their cost burden, those paying more than 30%, rise from 53% of your renters to 63%. Cost burden among your homeowners has actually fallen quite a bit. That could have to do with more people of means moving into your town. You actually also have more people who don't have a mortgage anymore. That kind of makes sense. The town is split 50-50 between people who moved in before and after 2010. So that's important, I think, for you to understand, right? You're not a town full of old timers who have been here forever, okay? You are 50-50 newbies and old timers. Very important for you to understand. 56% of your housing was built before 1980, 85% of it was built before 2000. And a Rochester resident currently must make about $72,000 to afford a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. Right now, I've got 2 slides left, I think. Oh, can you just click on that slide again?
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, you're good. So I mentioned, right? I mentioned these quintiles, the way that incomes have changed relative to inflation, right? Some people have seen their incomes go down, some have seen them go up modestly. Look what's happened here to your fair market rents in Rochester, okay? Your rents over that same period of time are up between 64 and 71% in the aggregate, right? So think about how much someone making only 2% more, what they're dealing with when their rent's going up 73%, right? Again, it's just gobbling more into their total income. That makes it difficult. I know you have some discussions probably about AMI here. These are affordable rents based on the different levels of AMI, affordable, quote unquote. Here at Ulster County, this is what the rent would be if you put 30% of your gross income toward your housing costs, right? So we talked about as the AMI goes up, those numbers become less realistic, and this is actually gonna be the source of a significant pattern research project in the fall, because basing affordable rent on AMI is just a broken methodology, and we're gonna look at what others are doing. Last two slides real quick. New York's birth rate is down, right? You know, births are down here in Ulster County. Public school enrollment across the Hudson Valley, there are 48,000 fewer kids in our public schools than 2004. 5,100 fewer children in Ulster County. The older half of our labor pool, right? This is our entire population in the region broken down into age cohorts. The older half of our workforce outnumbers the younger half by about 50,000 people in the region. What does that mean? A future of workforce shrinkage, but also for those who own a business, those are your future customers too. So you're talking about future customer shrinkage, not counting people in the region for tourism purposes, right? Full-time year-round. We've only built about 0.45 units of housing in the region for every job that we attracted. This is a big one, okay? If you are a two-person college-educated family with a kid, the monthly costs in New York of paying back his college loans and childcare right now is $2,500 a month. In fact, childcare is actually more expensive than the average housing cost in New York right now. So for those who are looking to buy a home, who are looking to get a toehold in their community, they have significant headwinds that my parents' generation didn't have in terms of other costs that they're wrestling with at this very important sort of, you know, escalating part of their lives, okay? I'm gonna say this over here. We feel really strongly, based on the data, that the future of the Hudson Valley is gonna be determined by two words that begin with the letter H. Humans and housing, and do we have enough of both, right? Because the data show us heading into this pattern of shrinkage. We're not alone. This is a global trend, but it affects us uniquely because of the housing costs in this region, okay? A couple other things, other issues I just want you to be thinking about in the context of housing. Food insecurity is growing. I'm sure you guys know that. You go down to the pantry at Rosendale or some of the others, they'll tell you demand is up almost by triple, okay? Because we're seeing more people have to choose between, do I pay the rent or do I pay for food? If they know there's a place to go get food, they choose the rent because they don't want to end up in some of these roach motels, frankly, where we're putting the homeless folks right now. It's a really bad situation. Generational transition in the workforce and potential liquidation. I'm not going to go through most of these, but as the baby boomers retire, there's going to be a lot of local businesses going through transition or liquidating. I mentioned childcare. Continuing wave of downtown revitalization. This one certainly affects you here in Rochester. We're trying to understand what happens with tourism. There's some sign that we've sort of crested the hill a little bit, and we may be coming ever so slightly back down, but then we're going to end at a plateau that's much, much higher than where we started before the staycation period, okay? And then I'll just say, because as we talk about solutions, I think something you all have to wrestle with is the fact that the conditions for building right now are awful, okay? There are a lot of developers on my board of directors. I talk with developers all the time. I'm grading projects from developers asking for millions of dollars of money from the state. And what I feel right now is if it's in the ground and they're building it, they're gonna push through all these economic headwinds and figure it out. But if it's not, they're parking the ship in neutral on every project that they have in the queue. Because material costs are high, they're worried about the tariff uncertainty, okay? There's a lot of challenges out there right now, including even before this uncertainty, it was very, very difficult for developers to put together what's called a capital stack, which is enough money from enough different sources that they need to build something. Average cost to build an apartment unit in the region right now is between $400,000 and $6,000, okay? Average cost to build, this isn't relevant to you, but it's relevant here in Ulster County, to build a parking structure is $50,000 per spot, okay? So costs are very high, and it's very, very hard to build anything. So as you're thinking about solutions, your solutions have to be discussed in the context of very unfavorable conditions for builders of all sizes and all types, building units that are appropriate for a rural context, like what we have here in Rochester, or an urban context, like some of the things they're doing. Okay? All right. I'm done.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
Thank you. So, we don't have a lot of time, but I think we have time for one or two questions for Adam before we move
I'll stick-
on. Yeah, are there any pressing? One or two,
I
yes,
have one quick question. Do you have the slides available either
Yeah.
online or a brochure?
Yeah, I can share them through.
Right.
yeah, if you sign up on the contact sheet, we can circulate the slides.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Yes,
You shared about, the jump in income that people brought into the county post-pandemic. I don't know whether it was 2021, I couldn't read the years.
yeah.
And you shared in that one particular year, $250 million
Yeah.
came in. What was it like, say, in 2024, 2023? You had
So those data aren't out yet because there's a 2-year lag on the data. So this year we'll get 2022, 2023's data. The most recent we have is the 2021, 2022, which for context, that's like the year mask restrictions were lifted. Right? And that year, the delta there was, I have a slide, but I don't remember. It was still high. It was like in the high 30 millions, but it was still more money coming in than going out. The thing is, you have more people going out than coming in. So what does that mean? The people coming in are bringing with them substantially higher incomes than the people moving out. And again, you know, I shared this with the county executive and others. I really am concerned for what that means for the workforce that's needed for medical centers and grocery stores and schools and daycare centers and like classic sort of blue collar, you know, middle class jobs that are filled by and large by folks who are leaving the county. Not in gigantic numbers, but in numbers big enough that it will have an effect.
One more quick question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if this study takes into effect, like, I mean, you talk a lot about housing and about affordability and keeping people here, families are less.
Yep.
So there's less people to work, but what about job growth and job wages to keep them here?
Yeah.
With fewer opportunities.
You know, it's the interesting thing. The number of jobs in the region is actually up substantially, right? So there are job opportunities. The biggest industry sectors that have grown in the region by far are healthcare and education, which is really driven by the major medical centers in the region, and the fact that we have 38 colleges in this region, right? Those jobs tend to pay pretty well, but then the second next fastest growing industry sectors are food, hospitality, and tourism. And are there some career ladders where you can get to a living wage there? Yes. Is it the largest proportion of those jobs? Absolutely not, right? And so our second biggest growing industry sectors tend to be the ones that pay wages that don't meet, you know, the affordability criteria for the types and costs of housing we have in the region. That's really tough. Orange County, just real quick, great example. Their data are horrifying, right? And the reason their data are horrifying is I'm sure those who have driven down the highways have seen warehouse and palooza, as I like to call it in Orange County, right? Warehouses popping up everywhere. Well, as they built those, they've really swapped out a bunch of $70,000 and $80,000 jobs for $40,000 and $50,000 jobs. Now, when you look at their data, it really shows in their median wage data that they have pursued industry sectors that pay less than ones that have left the county. And that's something you want to be careful about when you're thinking about economic development in the region or in our county or whatever.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, I'll be here.
All right, guys, so this next portion's just gonna hear a little bit of testimonial from residents. We had 2 residents that were gonna come, but one of them was unable to from a family matter. So first resident we're gonna hear is from my father, Neil Knapp. Yes, who's been through quite a background of different housing in town, and then I'm gonna share my perspective of as his child of those housing struggles in town. Take it away, Dad, wherever you want to start.
All right, where do I start?
The year was.
Well, in 2008. We lost our house to foreclosure because they gave me a mortgage I didn't deserve and couldn't pay. And after that, I rented. Found a place in Accord. We were living in Cohasset at the time. Found a place in Accord. It was a 3-bedroom. It cost me $1,300 a month. I had to leave that place because her daughter, the renter's daughter, was coming back from California. They wanted the house for them. So all of a sudden I had to look for a housing in, that was 2021. The kids were out of the house. My wife was doing healthcare in Kingston, so she was staying with the woman that she was taking care of, so I had to find a place for myself. I searched for about 6 weeks. Got tired of searching, couldn't find anything I could afford. I'm a retired carpenter on Social Security. I just luckily, I don't know how lucky it was, but luckily I was driving around and I stopped at a housing development across from the old Granite, which is the Hudson Valley Commons, which is a hovel. But I could afford it. So I just happened to stop and I saw one of the residents there and they gave me the number of the manager and they had a unit open and it cost me $950. And I said, okay, I can deal with this. The place has been problems since I moved in. It's flooded twice. There's critters. Anyhow, before I found this rental, I was even considering buying a camper because I had places I could at least park the camper. I was by myself. I said, I can deal with that. I've roughed it most of my life anyhow. I didn't have a problem with staying in a camper. I couldn't afford to do that, to pay for it, get the down payment and whatnot. So I found this place to rent. Now I had searched, like I said, about 6 weeks. Since I did start renting, after I lost my house, I went back to work because I wasn't making enough money with Social Security and my retirement from the Carpenters Union. It just wasn't enough to take care of bills. So now I work 30 hours a week, part-time, they call it. And that allows me at least to have, housing, food and whatnot. I'd like to move. It's not the greatest place in the world to live. We've had, shall I mention D?
No, I think everyone knows
Well,
what happened next door.
Next door, there was a murder next door, 2 doors down. The cops are there all the time. It's not the greatest place in the world to live. Nobody bothers me because I look the way I look. And I have an attitude. I would like to move. I've checked out Ellenville. I've checked around here. There's nothing. There's nothing. Now they want $1,400 for a 1-bedroom apartment. And I said, that's crazy. I'd have to go back to work in order to afford it. I don't know what the solution is here. It's a shame. I grew up in this area. I was born and raised in Ellenville during its heyday when the hotels were open. And you see it in Sullivan County. You see it here in Ulster County. There's abandoned hotels, bungalows. I'm not saying that now it's probably too late. Having done construction, I know a lot of them, it's better to tear them down. Even the Neville, you can't say that, but there were buildings that were allowed to rot, that could house people. What we have here is like you say, you have roach motels and they're all over the place, 4455, you just go up the hill. They're everywhere. And like I said, I don't know what the solution is. Having been in this valley my whole life, we knew after a while that the migration would come across the mountain, and it did. You know, the pandemic really solidified that idea. We were virginal for the most part around here, as far as influx of high-income people coming over. Orange County was a whole different matter. Sullivan was another matter altogether. But here, there wasn't that big influx, and then the pandemic hit and everybody came, started buying up the houses, and everything shot up. Everything. Right across the board, everything. Your housing, your food, your mechanics' wages, everything had to go up, you know? And it's not that you don't want that influx, but like you had said, a lot of the people that come in are either second homes or they work remotely and they're not pumping money into the economy every day of the week in this area. They're either going to New York City, you know, or they're weekend warriors. And they just come up on the weekends. And that's fine, but we've got to find something here that allows us to build. Find areas. You said you were a contractor and you guys, you know, the contractors are going to go out of business. I did residential contracting for 35 years and it was, you could see it slow down. In the early 90s, I think I went 1 year without building a house. You know, and it was crazy. And I see it happening again. Now the prices are going to go sky high because all our lumber's in Canada. We don't make lumber here. So, you know, what do you do if you can't build? And to find affordable housing here, it's next to impossible. If you have a family and have to do it, I wouldn't be able to do it. I'd go nuts. I'd shoot myself. I'd say to hell with this. Because I had friends that his son-in-law had to get out of his house in Allenville. It took him 9 months to find a house for his wife, him, and 3 children. You know, and he moved all the way up into Bly, you know, out of the town itself. And, you know,
How much, Dad, how much did you make too much to be in the senior housing in Ellenville? It was $500 a year?
I made $1,000 too much.
To qualify for
To
the senior
qualify for
housing
the
in
senior housing.
Allenville, Rosendale, or Kingston. From having a social security and his wages, so.
So it was either, you know, not do my part-time job and get a housing, but then I'd be eating cat food and roadkill and
He
things
doesn't.
like that.
All right, I gotta go sign him back in soon, guys, sorry. He doesn't eat cat food or roadkill for legal disclaimers. So that's where my dad came from in housing, and that's where, since 2008, when our house was foreclosed, where his story led. So in 2008, when our house was foreclosed, I often say to people, I have an older brother who's 3 years older than me. He graduated from high school that year. I entered high school that year. We had completely different lives. My father had a heart attack right before that happened also, that left our family very financially strapped from him being out of work for a year. The contractors that you talked about that sold their businesses and weren't here, my father had a local contracting business here for 30 years before he joined the union, Have Hammer Will Travel, that was based out of Hermiston and Napanoch, its entirety, and he joined the union to have a steady paycheck that was better for a family.
And benefits,
of four, and
retirement,
benefits and
yeah.
insurance, so.
Because most contractors, unless you're fairly large, you don't have any benefits for your workers. You don't have anything for anybody. Yourself hardly, you know. And if you do charge for it, you price yourself out of work. Is what, and it's, you know, it's a vicious cycle with that.
So I was a freshman in high school, so I had turned 14 that fall. And I got my working papers from the secretary at Rondout High School when I was 14, week after my birthday. And 2 weeks later, I applied to work at Ellenville McDonald's and I went to work. Because my parents were going through bankruptcy and I was gonna want a car and to go on school field trips and things like that. And my parents couldn't afford it, so I worked. I would take the UCAT bus from the end of Kaiserreich Road after school by myself at 14 down to Ellenville, get off, go work my shift at McDonald's, and one of my parents would come pick me up. So from there, I went to college. Foreclosure takes a long time. We say in 2008, my house was foreclosed. That's when it started. Foreclosure, you can apply for bankruptcy, which delays it. You can do things that delay the process. And I was 14-year-old. I didn't know these things. I just assumed that any given day we were going to get kicked out of our house. So takes a couple years. I left for college. I graduated in 2011. I went away, went to college in the city, which was a little too much for the little country mouse I was, having been raised in Kerhonkson. And I moved back home after that first year to that same house. And 3 months later, we were officially thrown out by the sheriffs. So I came back home from college after living in a dorm, evicted, thrown out, foreclosure from the only home I've known besides the rental that we lived in until I was 4. That was down the road on Sampsonville. Then from there, I lived in the rental with my father and went back to in and out of school at Ulster and still continued to work in the area and eventually gave up on school because it was, even though at Ulster is only about $3,000 a year or a semester, it was too expensive for me to afford and be able to split the rent and the utilities with my parents at our new house. And eventually working, got independent, moved into an apartment in Cottick Hill for a couple of years. That ended 2019, right before the pandemic happened. I moved back in with my father in that 3-bedroom, and the month before he was evicted, I had moved out to go live with my cousin in their home share. And so I just moved out, moved my stuff out. I was actually in the middle of doing my campaign for running for office here, and I just stopped my campaign to move everything from my father's 3-bedroom house into a storage unit or throw it out in dumpsters, so that he could fit in the 1-bedroom apartment he was moving into from a 3-bedroom house with a 2-car garage. So,
Which is the point to make too. We had, you know, you accumulate stuff during your lifetime and things you don't want to get rid of, but you have an apartment that the stuff doesn't fit into. So what do? You rent a storage unit. So this is a few $100s more every month for you to store your things. So you don't have to throw them away, and you know, it's a vicious cycle when those things happen if you get stuck in it. I've clawed my way out of it. You know, I don't live high on the hog, as they say, but you know, I get along, it's all right. But I see people in my housing development. It's scary. It's absolutely scary. These people are disabled. They have to have their food delivered. There's health people that come in all the time. And I know if their apartments are like my apartment, I can fix things. The sink breaks, I fix it. I don't wait for the maintenance man to come around. The door doesn't work, I fix it. These people don't have that option. They're stuck, you know? And it's a scary thing. It really is a scary thing. I can deal with it, but I don't know how these people do it. I really don't.
yeah, and I'll wrap up with, I said earlier, I married someone who has a house, who bought a house. My husband bought our house. It had been abandoned for 15 years. He bought it in 2018. He was very lucky that he did that. It was before we had gotten together, and we got a home construction loan that changes into a mortgage. We started construction in the fall of 2019 on our house. Our house is now valued way higher than the $60,000 my husband bought it for cash because it was falling apart. But I have now had to invest so much money into building the house to finish out my construction loan that we are more in debt from building our house than we would have been buying another house, but this was one of the only options he was able to find. My husband's 8 years older than me at the time, trying to find a starter home in this area. He couldn't find anything he could afford that he could get a loan for. The only thing he can get a loan for in his price range was paying for that house cash and then getting a loan to improve it. But when, you know, that happens, the foundation was bad. That wasn't in the original plan in the budget. It was the start of 2020 when we hit the last lumber crisis that we're about to hit again. So we are 2 people out of those 7,300 that live in this town. I'm sure everyone knows someone with a really difficult housing story. My best friend, it took her 2 years to buy her house for $80,000 because it shared a well with the neighboring house that was a falling apart condemned meth lab. And the owner was nowhere to be found, so she couldn't get an agreement saying to detach the well. So it took her 2 years to buy the house she had lived in and been renting to own for over 10 years. That's where I home shared, and it took them $80,000. That house is falling apart, and they're never going to get that value out of it, and it's just going to keep crumbling. And her and her husband both have bachelor's degrees and are working for us in this area, and they can't afford to fix the house in any type. They can't get loans from college loan credits. It's a struggle that so many people have in this area, and housing is a universal need: food, water, shelter. Everyone needs those things to live, so.
Well, thank you both for sharing that. We really appreciate you putting all of that out for us. It's about 4:30 now. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Jill. To share, we're sort of shifting into what are some potential solutions for some of these problems. So did you want to do an intro or?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna see if I can share my slides. Hold on a second.
I can make you a co-host, but
Okay.
we're happy to have with us Jill, a town board member from the town of Southold, who's been very active on housing issues. Jill has been instrumental in the initiative to establish a community housing fund in Southold, and we are anxious to learn more about that. She shared a little bit about her background in Southold and how long she's been involved with the board. And they're part of what's called the Peconic Bay region. So the housing fund that they have is actually for a region there. We do see some striking similarities between the 2 communities. So, you know, we know that it's different, but there is a lot of similarities in terms of the makeup of homes, the need, and also just like the scenic nature of both areas.
Thank you. So it's let's see if I can. I did share my slide with Ken, so he could share it with you if we can't. I'm not used to running the Zoom. People always run it for me. So
you have screen share ability now.
Okay.
So if you want to, you should be able to go to the bottom, the green box. You can hit share and then select the window with your slides.
Okay.
Just wanted to add, in case for those of you that don't know New York geography, this is the North Fork of Long Island, and it is like historically an agricultural area that also has been a hotbed of hospitality weekends. You know, a lot of people go out there on weekends. I think I was there in May, and there was like, I don't want to say apple picking, but there was like all this traffic and you know, kind of like, it just reminded me of Ulster County, just a lot flatter.
Yeah, that's thank you. You know what, in the interest of time, I'm not gonna share my screen because it's just but it's something that you can share with the community, because it was the slides are basically what we prepared when we talked to our civic group, just explaining our housing program that we have, but it would be quicker if I just talk about it. So to start, we are the eastern end of Long Island. We're closer to Connecticut than we are New York City, as the crow flies. We're about 3 miles wide. We were surrounded by water. We are a destination place. This is where all your potatoes used to come from. Now it's where all your wine comes from. So a lot of people come out here and go to our wineries, and which also created a whole new sort of problems for our area with traffic. There's 2 roads in and out of here. We call one State Route 25 and County Route 48, and there's farm stands on both roads. So you can imagine the traffic. We have this one very productive farm stand at Harb's Farm, and we actually send police officers there in this summer to direct traffic, and they keep time frames, and we make the farm pay us back for that time for our police officers because they can't be somewhere else. So we're a town that has to think of creative solutions for things, and housing is no different. My story, I got divorced. I bought my house with my then husband in '92, and we got it. It was kind of falling apart, and the people wanted to get rid of it, so we got a good price on it. It's just a 1,200 square foot ranch on a half acre. Raised my 2 kids there. Both my kids live down south in different states now because I couldn't afford to live here, and there's not much for that age group. And most of our population, about 60% of it, are seniors. We have a major hospital here. We have a nursing home and another nursing home that's more of a Peconic Landing. It's kind of, it's aging, aging into the nursing home. So as you get older, you can buy a place, and then as you age, you'll get into their nursing home. And and then we have a lot of hospitality workforce. We try not to, and we do have some. We have Section 8 housing. We have a village within our town, and they have a separate board, the village board, and then we're the town board. So that's kind of the makeup of our town. We do have our local code is there's no Airbnbs allowed, but as you can imagine, we have no control over that. We just recently purchased some IT programs to help us with that, and our code enforcement is getting used to that program, and hopefully that will help us find the Airbnbs. And we're looking for a new Airbnb code, so we'll be allowed to allow some of them, but we're looking at things like maybe we have 5 hamlets within our town, so each hamlet can have a certain amount of Airbnbs, so we can control the amount of Airbnbs and open up these houses for rentals. Our rental code is 14 days and more, and you need a rental permit, which is like a minimal $100 for a 2-year permit. So we make sure, and I made up that rental code a few years back, and it's simple. It's just to make sure you have a CO on the house so it's safe for people to live. They have the CO protectors, and because we had a house fire with a couple of deaths because our local fire department went in and into a big house, and like a center hall colonial type house, and the hallway was blocked because people put walls up because there was probably 25 people living in that house, and 2 people died that day. That was a few years ago. We just recently had that again. Somebody was in the attic, couldn't get out, and died. So we still have those crowded house issues because there's so many Airbnbs, and we are a second home community. We're about 20,000. We were about 20,000 people. COVID brought out a lot of people from Manhattan that bought houses out here. Our median household income is $770,000. Our median rent is between $2,000 and $3,000 a month. I am very fortunate to have a friend that owns a building with 2 apartments upstairs, and I'm only paying $1,600 a month. But I say that, and I don't make enough money to qualify for workforce housing if I needed it. I have 3 jobs. I have a county job. I have the town job. The town board job is a part-time job. And then I've always cleaned houses or waitress or bartended and did things like that. And I still have a house that I manage because the people live up the island. I'm explaining all about myself because a lot of people, the blue collar people, are in a very similar situation as I'm in. And They work at the hospitals, which is a great job. They have health benefits. But a lot of my friends that work at hospitals, they're bartenders at night. You know, they have to have at least 2 jobs to live. I've had a friend that her son just moved up to Rochester. I have family that grew up in Rockville Center years ago and have made their lives up in Rochester because it was cheaper. So we've always been a little bit more expensive than you guys. So with that, we struggled with we have a 2% real estate transfer tax. We've had that for quite a while. I think we're up to about 10,000 acres that we've preserved. And we probably have about 10,000 more that we can preserve. And it's a program where the farmer has to come to us. We can't make anybody do it. It's, you know, if the farmer wants to preserve their land, and, you know, in order to sustain farming. And a lot of our farmers have to do that because they can't make the money farming anymore. So we've been very successful with that. And I think we talked about it for a year or two when we finally put it on the ballot. Now the transfer tax is 2.5%. So 0.5% of transfer tax goes into for housing. And we have about 3 million, maybe it's always the county gives us the money, so it's always behind. So it's probably about 3.5 million now. We have the New York State government did a Peconic Region Community Housing Act, and it's a statute that was done in 2021 that all 5 East End for the 5 East End towns, which is Southold, East Hampton, Riverhead, Shelter Island, and Southampton. And I think Shelter Island was the only one that didn't do the 0.5%. And so now we have to have a housing plan, and it's a community housing advisory board, and it's made up of all the different industries. And this is as of New York State statute. So we have real estate professionals, financial banking, local housing advocacies, human services organizations, legal experts, and you know, we had the village person, you know, all the people from the community. We worked with our consultants that we hired and our talented planners, and we came up with a framework of a housing plan. And that's where Ken found it, and Ken and I have been talking. Now we're in the process of putting the wheels on that framework, if you will, because it's the legislators that have to make the code part. The first thing we're doing, and we decided to do, so obviously a housing plan is filled with subsidies. And so you have to have so many different tools in your toolbox, because not one thing is not going to work. The more tools you have, the more things are going to work, and it's still going to be very difficult. So the first thing we did, and we have we're just getting ready to set a public hearing, which we'll probably have it in June by the time we go through the whole process. Basically, what we're doing is subsidies for contractors. So you got a couple of contractors in the room. So say you find one of these hotels that are dilapidated, and he buys it and he wants to make it apartments and keep it affordable. We start at, actually, I'll give you the example we're working on in town. There's an old bank on one of the streets that's right in the downtown hamlet. So it's got a lot of stores and restaurants right around it. And he's going to make it, the bottom will be retail and the top will be 12 apartments. We're going to be giving him $55,000 per apartment. Then there's a checklist of different things. So for refurbishing, so not building new, he gets another percentage. He's going through the new septic, the updated septic, so he gets another percentage. And then we keep adding, you go down, so it's kind of fair depending on if somebody's building something from scratch or repurposed, and we have different things. And so he's getting, for the 12 units, I think we're giving him $1.3 million for construction. The way we figured that out is, and the way the process that we haven't adopted yet is, maybe he'll get that half in the beginning and maybe half mid-construction, but we're going to have him do a bond for the whole amount. When he gets the CO for the whole building, he'll get that, we'll release that bond. That way the town is not out if he abandons the project and runs away with the money, you know, so it's complicated. You got to think of all these things. So we have that 12 units that will be on the ground. I mean, he's waiting on the health department because we have sanitary flow credits he had to give. Our sanitary flow credits for construction, you have to buy them. And that comes from our protected land, builds our bank. But for affordable housing, we're giving them to the contractors for free. So there's so many different ways that you can give subsidies. So then we have another project. The town owns the land. It's 5 acres. We're going to subdivide it because we want half of it to be recreational. And the other half, according to our zoning code, he can fit like 22 units. He's going to do 22 single units, 2 and 3 bedroom units. And he'll get that $55,000 base. And these houses are going to be for sale, not for rent. And he'll get that $55,000 base. He's building from scratch, so he wouldn't get that percentage. And there's a whole list of different percentage. The other way we can give him subsidies is we're going to sell him the land for fairly cheap. And we can take, what we can do is we can say, we'll pay for the water hookup because we need, water hookup. We'll pay for the roads. So he'll pay for all that, and we'll take that off the sale price of the house. So say we're giving him the property for $300,000, and the roads cost and the water hookup costs $150. We'll take $150 off the sale price. So there's another creative way that we could give them subsidies without taking cash out of our coffers of the $3 million. So that's where we're getting that. Hopefully by June, we'll have that approved and adopted into our housing plan. The next subsidies are the subsidies for the individuals who are buying houses, renting houses. So we're going to be working that out. It's about partnerships with the contractors. We're making sure that these are in perpetuity, so we don't, because the affordable housing that I mentioned in the beginning that I was involved in the 80s and 90s, they had I had a friend buy one and he just sold it for $2 million because we didn't have that cap of you have to stay affordable. So our normal houses that people that I bought in 92 for $350,000 are going for $800,000 now, and they're not even updated, so that's the reality of what we have here too. The ideas that we have for subsidies for people are maybe for, say, a rental, we would give them 3 months, and we go by the HUD, we approve the HUD rental amounts for AMI. Our area medium income is lower than the Suffolk County HUD thing, so it's still, we try to get 100 to 120 AMI, which means you got to make about $80,000. A single person would have to make about $80,000 a year to afford a 1-bedroom rental, which would be $1,600 a month. And like I said, I don't make that on my 3 jobs right now, so I wouldn't qualify. Then we're talking about like, okay, we're going to give, say, a rental person 3 months worth of rent because you need the down payment, the down payment, security, whatever. Then if they stay there a certain amount of time, like not too long, they have to pay that back. If they stay there longer, the longer you stay there, you don't have to pay that subsidy off. We have non-interest loans that we can give people to buy houses for a down payment, like, give them a non-interest loan for contractors, actually, for non-interest loans for contractors. That's another way we can do that. But we would give, we can give subsidies for down payments, and we're going to be working all that out. And the whole thing is we just started the 0.5%. It's been just 2 years, and real estate, of course, kind of went down. So it's not building as fast as we want. We estimated when we did the plan 2 years ago, we estimated about $2 million a year this fund will get. We have another project that was in the queue in COVID, and it dropped out because of COVID and his financing went. He's calling us back again and he wants to start, and now he's thinking of, part of his is a old house right on the main road. It's actually right next to town hall, and then he has woods behind it. So he's thinking of splitting it up and making the 2 apartments at the house, get that going. So we have 2 units on the ground while he redoes his plan for the backwoods that would be brand new construction, to, you know, kind of make it cheaper, a little bit of different layout. And with all that, we had somebody that wanted to come in and do an affordable housing, and they spent thousands of dollars on plans, on this and that. And ultimately the town board decided, no, we're not changing your zone. So after that happened, I said, we can't do this again. People want to do this stuff and they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on plans. So I developed a community housing advisory, a community housing, we have so many different names, but I call it my pre-submission board. So we have somebody now that's coming in, he wants to build 22 houses for rent. So he's going to come before the board. He'll have a sketch plan. The board consists of 3 town board members, somebody from our housing commissions, somebody from zoning board, somebody from planning board, somebody from the building department. And we go over all these, he explains his plan. We ask him all these questions. One of our planners has like a litany test, and we grade that. And if it goes, and if it gets high scores, then this group recommends to the town board to entertain a change of zone application. Then the person will spend a little more money. Part of the questions we ask is not just his current finances, but his long-term finances and his maintenance. The person that's doing the 12 units is asking us what happens in 10, 20 years when I need to do some maintenance. Can I come back and apply for more subsidies? Right now, we don't have that answer because we don't know. It's kind of hard for us to do that long-term planning as well. So those are things also that we're going to figure out in the plan. So it's, I like the way we did this. We had our community stakeholders with consultants, with our planners. I facilitated the meetings. We met once a week for 8 months straight, and we came up with this 81-page plan, which Ken has, and he share with all you guys. Now, like I said, now we have to put the wheels on. When we had the public hearing to adopt this plan, there was a lot of controversy about don't adopt it till you have it done. Well, the problem is we've been working on housing because we've had a housing commission for eons, and we don't have any plan. So we can't get things done. Now that we have the money, let's get some sort of plan that pushes us to get the plan. So this person with the 12 units, once he gets his health department, he's ready to go to the building department, and he can start building this summer. And, you know, within 12 to 18 months, we'll have 12 units on the ground with individuals being able to move in. So we're very excited about that. And, you know, it's the 0.5% vote went, you know, regular election day and it overwhelmingly passed. Which was surprising to me because a lot of people think affordable housing, they think Section 8. We try to use the terms attainable housing and workforce housing. Because like I said, I mean, I don't mind sharing what I make with you guys because it's a county job. It's all, you can look it up if you have to, but I make about $76,000 a year. And a lot of these people, you know, can't afford to buy anything. I mean, it's just like all the stories I'm hearing from you guys. So it's workforce houses. So, you know, the Section 8 housing is people that are making $15,000, $20,000 a year. And we do have sections in town that are like that. Sections in town that, you know, we're dealing with affordable housing unit that was built a few years ago that they were zoned properly. They were able to hook up with the sewage from the village. So it really wasn't a town project. Well, now we're dealing with it because our building inspector said that it's unlivable. You know, they did a really cheap HVAC system, mold all over. My niece lives there with her 2 kids. She was She works at the local hospital in Greenport. Her kids go to the Greenport school. She had to move to Riverhead to a hotel without, and Riverhead is like 20 miles to the west, without kitchen facilities for her, you know, kindergartner and her toddler. And, you know, she was out for, I think, 6 weeks while they fixed her apartment. And so we're definitely want to avoid those kind of construction situations as well. So that's why getting your long-term financial questions answered before you go further, and, you know, make that contractor think, what am I going to do a year or 2 or 3 down the road? How am I going to, part of this rent is they have to figure out it's not enough to put in savings so they can fix things later. They're just going to have to figure out how are they going to put money away to fix the leak, to, you know, fix the roof in 10, 15, 20 years, you know. So those are questions that it's very important that the municipality asks the contractor, and we know, so then we don't have the places like the gentleman spoke about where he lives.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, thank you, Jill. Those are really helpful. It's really helpful to hear your experience. We're coming up on 5 o'clock, which was the published time that we said we would go through. So what I was thinking, we did have a interactive feedback activity planned. So we could either have the housing committee close with sharing some more things that they're working on and other solutions, and then people can stay and give us that feedback as you're leaving, and maybe getting some snacks, and we can document it. Just to give you a heads up, what we want to hear from you is, if you had a magic wand, what housing solution would you propose for the town? So that's what, as you're leaving, I hope that you'll think about that and offer us that feedback. I think Claire had one question for Jill, and then we're gonna have the housing committee close with what they've been working on.
Before I get that question, I just wanted to mention one more thing, because I know there's one lady there about ADUs. We have a public hearing in May to change our code to have people be able to build ADUs, because we Long Island Housing Partnership got south of town $2 million through New York State, and people can apply up to $125,000 grant to build an ADU, whether it's refurbishing the garage or building but then they got approved from that, and they go to the building department and they're like, sorry, our code doesn't allow you, because we had like a 3-year wait, because we were trying to not have people build a lot. So we're taking that 3-year wait off. So now these people can build their ADUs. So the town also has to look at their zoning code when they're making up this housing plan.
Yeah. Here, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask or clarify that you came up with this 0.5% because it had a lot to do with an already existing conservation plan that was 2%. Is that true? But that lower percentage, because we don't have either yet.
Right. Yeah, it was a little easier for the East End towns, because most of them had the 2%. And you know, it was Assembly and Senate kind of came up with the 0.5%, because the statute, it was Governor Cuomo that came up with these regulations at first. And I think it was more, you know, told to us, you know, do a 0.5%. So it was easy for us to attach it to a program we already have, even though it's kind of separate. So it was easy we didn't even get money for a while, because the county controller is like, the statute doesn't tell me how I'm supposed to give the money back to you. He could give the 2% back to us because that was already established, but the 0.5% was a different line item in the budget. And so then the Assembly and Senate had to go back and do an addendum to the statute in order to tell the county how to give it back to the town. So there's a lot of details when you do make up a program like that. Because all the taxes are collected, go to the counties, and then the county disseminates them to the firehouse, the library, the schools, the towns. So it's complicated. So it was easier for us, but it was more of the state and you know, the Assembly and Senate came up with a 0.5%.
Jill, I wanna help with the answer to this. So
Yes, thank you.
Her assembly person is named Fred Thiel. I'm actually gonna be
Yeah.
with him tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Tell
He,
my son.
he essentially, they're the only 4 towns in the entire state that have that 0.5%, as you know. But it was really Fred Thiel, their assembly person, who drove this. And it's the same exact kind of local enabling legislation that allows us to have sales tax in Ulster County. So they're two separate programs. And right now, I was talking to Ken about this over email, wherever Ken there's. Right now, the state of play up in Albany is the state is very interested in allowing more of these beyond just the 4 towns on Long Island. They're not as interested in allowing more community preservation funds. In fact, the Senate has said you can have one here in Ulster because the entirety of Ulster County already has the enabling legislation. There's additional counties trying to get them, and the Senate staff has said no, they will not entertain additional community preservation funds in the state right now. They are willing to entertain additional community housing funds. So the reason I'm going to be with Fred Thiel on Tuesday is there's a discussion as part of that housing and conservation group that I helped to run about how can we get that, have both, like they have on Long Island, and at least have the enabling legislation allow the local communities to figure that out. The only opposition you have is from some of the realtors, frankly. The Realtors Association has generally been against this, and they have a lot of sway in Albany over this sort of stuff. So the reason we're talking with Fred is because Fred is the only one who was able to overcome the real estate lobby somehow, the realtors lobby. And so we're gonna gain some information from him on Tuesday about how we did that.
And the other thing they added to the statute is historic preservation and water quality. And then it's up to each municipality if they wanted to adopt that. Southall Town has a robust land preservation, and so we have not adopted the historic preservation or water quality. We're getting pushback from our village mayor for us because they need help with their sewer system. But Southampton Town, like I said, we probably have 20 million in our preservation fund for our land preservation. Southampton Town, I think, has over 200 million, and they don't have the farmland to preserve that we do. So they are putting some of their money into historic preservation and water quality. So that's another thought, of what your needs are.
Great. Jill, can you stick around just in case anyone has questions?
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
great. So we're gonna go ahead and try to close somewhat on time. So I'm gonna turn it over to the Housing Advisory Committee.
All right, I'm Marty Robert, and I was asked to speak. We are one of many advisory committees chartered by the town board, and obviously our issue is to determine what can be done for the housing crisis. We've been meeting for 2 years. We're getting up to speed. We have learned about the state pro-housing community initiatives. In the county, we can become a housing smart community, and this gives us access to a lot of valuable information, expertise, and hopefully funds. We've started a survey. We started it last fall. If we have your contact information, you will be getting a copy of it. It's good to hear from people. This is absolutely critical to have face-to-face meetings, but we also have a written survey, which is very valuable. We need to hear from as many people, and when you get it, circulate it, okay? The county has provided us with a contract with the Pace University Housing Action Council, and they have been working with us to look at our zoning, to look at potential building sites, property that's for sale. And we have been meeting with them to determine, what some of the pitfalls would be, what some of the advantages would be of certain sites. But it's preliminary, we're just getting our sea legs now. One thing we have looked into is the long-term rental crisis. There's very little to rent. That has brought us to the conclusion that non-owner occupied short-term rentals really need to be limited. And we have made that recommendation to the town board. It's just not sustainable. But we see a big difference if it's an owner occupied short-term rental. It may be senior citizens who could not afford to stay locally if they didn't have the extra income, okay? Now, the exciting thing we've worked on, and it was just mentioned in Southold, are the ADUs. The accessible dwelling units are permitted and encouraged. And as the Southold speakers mentioned, there is money available. There are rounds of money available to help lower income owners either refurbish or build from scratch an ADU. Now, the ADU can be attached to your main residence with a separate, entrance. It can be a second floor on a garage. It could be a basement with a proper entrance, or it could be a separate facility altogether. Lots of possibilities, and it would increase the long-term rental availability. If someone is eligible for the funds that should be available soon, you do have to promise to rent it to someone of modest income for a certain amount of time at a modest rental. But it is the best show in town right now, and it's the quickest way to perhaps get some more rentals for people who need them. Now, my husband and I had been married 6 months in 1971 when we came across the mountain. We found the property we wanted at the price we could pay. I would hope that eventually young people again have that option. Of course, now that I'm more senior than I'd like to admit, I realize if we don't need it, there are other seniors in the community that are going to need to downsize and find safe and affordable places. So you've got the young people, you've got us oldsters, that really have very significant needs in the pipeline. And that's what we're working on. Thank you. Oh, and we have a couple of vacancies on the committee. If people are interested, we're learning to build it up.
I also, if anyone here just wants a primer on what last round of RUPCO's ADU +1 program, which is what Marty was talking about, the funding available. I have last year's criteria here. The numbers are going to be tweaked for this next round, which is supposedly the funds are getting released like the next few weeks. But if anyone here is interested or knows somebody, I can give you some information.
Sorry,
You
so
want me to say it?
the ADUs are coming out in the summer. I just heard yesterday at a county event.
They keep pushing the
Or
application
Friday.
opening, but
Yeah, they're pushing the application opening, but it
Yeah.
should, we were promised by summer, so.
yeah, so.
But great, I was gonna say, I'll wrap up with us, guys. First of all, to everyone who's come today, thank you guys so much, for coming, joining, learning. I hope to chat and talk to some of you, after we finish the formal session, portion of this. Can I just ask, though, that all the members of the housing committee stand for me, please? They are the ones who, yes, now stand up. They're the ones who helped put most of this in order. Did Ken leave to the bathroom? Ken, we saw him with the laptop before everyone. But just a round of applause for them for having this together. This is the first of these community forums, and like Erin said, I second the notion that I really want to have more community engagement and info sessions like this so that we can have more open discussions like I hope to have with you guys now as everyone's grabbing snacks and looking at the surveys and stuff while we go. But thank you again for coming.
I actually have a question about the whole ADU. So it's adding on to a pre-existing, like to someone's home. So I'm assuming if that person were to sell their home, that increases the value of that home, and does that make that home stay in terms of like zoning, that ADU stays that home forever even when they sell it?
Yes.
It does.
Yes,
So it stays
ADUs are
an ADU
how the
for-
zoning code is written. If it's applied
Yes.
for as an ADU building permit, yes, it has to stay as an
Yeah.
ADU. It can't be
It can't be
changed.
short-term
Same with like, I know with the grant program, like there you have to be like, even if the property is sold, their REPCO's grant agreements for building those ADUs, they still are held tight to those 10 years at 80% AMI or less renters. So there normally are stipulations to make sure that those are, they can't be turned into Airbnbs or things like that, if that's what you were thinking.
Well, like the grant program, right? If you wanted,
Yeah.
if you guys wanted to build an ADU on your property with your own money, and you know, it's allowed, and if that, you know, can, I mean. If you were doing it like in a short-term rental STR, you still have to go through the motions of getting a permit in the town, depending on how many permits are available that particular year. But what Charlotte was referencing is if you want to build your ADU, then you're held to those.
I was saying both, our local law is two.
Oh.
Yeah, it's in perpetuity. Right, is that how perpetuity in there? Yeah.
So so what the the ADU law in our town passed in 2022. And what it made possible is, so if you have additional acreage in our town, you've always been able to, like, if you have like 10 acres and you live in R5, you can build 2 homes. We've always had that. But for people that live on the acreage that's their zoning density, you can only have 1 unit up until 2022, where we allowed the accessory dwelling unit. So part of the ask in that is that they not be used for short-term rentals, because we're making a you know, the idea is that the density is increasing. So we didn't want to have it be a business, because you could have, if you're in R1, you could, as long as you meet your setbacks and your septic and water can handle it, you could now build an ADU on 1 acre. So you can have 2 dwelling units on 1 acre. So we put that into our code that you can only use them for long-term.
You can use it for long-term, but you could, if you're using your own money to build it and you're not getting subsidized by the government in any way.
It doesn't matter.
Let me finish my question. So then you can still rent it out. She doesn't have to rent it out at 80%.
Correct. She can
No,
rent it out for
yeah,
whatever.
and that's,
Yeah.
I was saying only for
Yeah.
that program, sorry if that wasn't clear.
Yeah,
I
got
was
it.
explaining it.
I think,
But yeah,
yeah.
thank you, everyone. Please check out the boards, grab snacks. There's tons of them.
If you have more
And
questions.
if you have more
we can
questions,
cluster,
yeah, please.
The microphone for Jill is right here.
Yes. So what are they supposed to do?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, like, since we don't have that. The magic wands, like where.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Also, my boss, Janet, Monica. I'm the running.
Jill, thank
Oh,
you for coming.
nice.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'll see you on the 7th.
We're talking about what happened so far. I'll look at
Thank you.
I know. What's the density you're talking about? Yeah. I know, all my children are there.
Based on what we're saying, say, gonna round up. Sale price was 300,000. Was we were buying a house or selling something for 500,000. I was buying.
Outside of the luxury businesses like.
You know, other minus the.
I actually ran into you 30 years ago.